Welcome to Communication, Connection, Community, the Podcaster's Podcast. This podcast takes a deep dive into modern-day communication strategies in the podcasting space. We chat with interesting people who make the podcasting and speaking spaces exciting and vibrant. We also dive into the podcasting community with news, updates, latest trends and topics from this ever-evolving space. So strap in. It's going to be one amazing ride. Let's dive into today's episode. And our guest today is Philip Blackett. He's an author, consultant, and entrepreneur who previously has worked with FedEx, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Chick-fil-A. He got his Master's of Divinity degree from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, his MBA from Harvard Business School, and his bachelor's degree majoring in political science and economics from the University of Northern Carolina at Chapel Hill. Philip has previously been featured in Business Insider, Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, and LinkedIn, as well as a number of podcasts. He's a podcaster. We are so thrilled he's here today. Philip, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Carl. Happy to be here with you.
There are so many things, my friend, I know we are going to cover because it's nice talking to a fellow podcaster because we can dive deep and also dispel myths and rumors and things like that about, what's going on in the podcasting space. I like the fact that you have not one, but soon to have two podcasts, correct?
Yeah, soon to be two. And I've actually done some podcast shows in the past too. So I think the first podcast show I've done, it probably takes me back closer to 2013.
Okay, so not a veteran, not an early adopter when there was two listeners and one podcast, but a few years after that. But thinking back to 2013, though, that was an interesting time for podcasting because there was still only, maybe 500,000 shows or something like that then?
Yeah, I think we were still trying to figure out what this was all about.
And the journey has since been phenomenal for you. You're embarking on the second show. How does it feel soon to be having two shows?
Well, I'll tell you this. It was something I wasn't anticipating, especially not as soon as I was thinking it was to be the case. But I believe the reason why I'm actually jumping back into the pool of hosting another podcast show is because of what we'll be talking about soon, which is AI.
AIO. It's a hot button topic right now. It's one that I think we're going to embrace. Before we embrace that, though, we were just chatting. This is why I wish that sometimes the things that happen before the show, maybe I should start hitting record right away because those sometimes are the best moments. But we were talking about audio versus video, and coming from an audio background, having 25 years in radio broadcasting and starting an audio only podcast back in 2019, I was a little late to the party, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not as late as people starting today. There's never a bad time to start a podcast, by the way, and the best time is now if you haven't started one yet. Anyways, there's my PSA for that. But starting an audio-only podcast and then helping people in the podcasting space, I recognize that there's certainly some validity to having a video show, but you were just saying that, with all the tools that are out there now, that it seems to make sense to you to be jumping into the video space.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, as you were talking about this, Carl, is the reason why, even with my new show coming up, the reason why I would do a video version of it is simply to get 30 to 60 second reels out of it to promote the show. Because honestly, I don't think it's a very interesting video to watch just me and a microphone talk to you. That's kind of why when you watch the news, or if you still do, you don't just see the anchors for a whole hour. You're seeing like them showing B-roll, playing other videos, doing a green screen with the weather forecast, aerial footage, video of the traffic. People are going to get bored really quickly and they just see two talking heads behind a microphone. It's just hard to watch because otherwise you're thinking to yourself, and I know I do I really need to sit here and watch this? Like, can I take in the same amount of content on an audio version and do something more productive, like taking a walk, doing laundry, preparing food for dinner and that sort of thing? So I think that's the kind of angle I will look at it. Like audio, it makes perfect sense. That's really your content. Unless you're having like video footage and content to share that's outside of you talking in a microphone. But yeah, the only other reason I would think to think about a video podcast if you don't have those B-rolls and all those other things that keep it interesting and non-boring, is this is primarily a marketing play to promote your podcast in this form of getting 30-second to 60-second video reels that you can put out on social media and further get more listeners to your podcast.
And let's face it, without audio, there is no video.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Without audio, and I'll even go so far as to say without good quality audio, there is no video, right? Because I still think the most important piece is the audio. But to your point, I think you're correct in saying that there's an uptick in this popularity with reels, and not only on YouTube, which at the end of the day is, let's face it, it's a behemoth of a directory of files. That's all YouTube is. And when I say that to people, they go, yeah, but I'm like, no, let's boil it down to what it is. YouTube happened to be to the party first. That's how they got to be as big as they are. They're part of Google. Google is big, YouTube's big, and it keeps getting bigger. But there are other video platforms out there people haven't even heard of that do as many amazing things as YouTube does, maybe even more amazing. They're just not that well known, right? And don't ask me to quote what they are, because I can't even remember what some of them are. But there are several of them. Yeah, exactly. But when you say YouTube, it's like Google. Google has become not just a company. Google has become, it's a noun. It's a verb. I'm going to Google that, right? YouTube has become the same thing. I'm going to YouTube how to bake a cake. I'm going to YouTube that. It's a verb. Right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is a behemoth of a directory. What's interesting, though, is the quantity versus the quality of these video shorts and reels that are out there. And you've seen them, Philip, I'm sure. The ones where, the host is looking down on the guests like they're shining down from above, or they're looking up, their little tiny bottom of the screen, their screen, or the captions are going too fast, or the captions are covering their faces. That's, again, hopefully it's good audio, because the video certainly isn't that great. So when we're putting things out there, we still want to make sure that, and I'm sure you'll do this, I'm sure your video content will be spot on, because I think you already understand this, that the content that you're putting out there as a marketing tool, it needs to be a reflection of who you are, your brand, your business, but also your credibility.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. It's like, if your video is crappy, that's going to share a certain type of message to the people that say, I don't know if I should watch this, because if this is the video, I don't know how the audio is when I actually take a listen to it. But to your point, audio is definitely king on this one. It's like, that's primarily what they wanted to see. Imagine if you just saw a video of a person and no audio is coming out, just weird. So it's more so about what you're saying. But yeah, to your point, you want to be careful, you want to be professional, you want to be considerate the type of videos and reels that you're using to promote your show, because if they're not effective in promoting your show, then it's not going to be effective at getting listeners to your show.
And let's face it, even though we say we don't judge, we say, well, I'm not a judgy person. Yeah, we are. We're always looking at a video. There are people judging this episode right now. Philip, you're phenomenal. They're probably judging mostly me and saying, oh, what a crackpot he is.
Well, that's part of the reason why I'm glad this is an audio podcast, right? Because if they took a look at me, they might switch the channel.
No, it's me. They always switch the channel from. No, it's you. No, it's me. But no, it's so true that it's putting out the best version of yourself. And I attune it to, I'll take it back a step, and then I do want to go into this deeper dive into AI. I attune it to speaking on a stage as well, but I also tune it to business in general. You wouldn't take your car to an auto mechanic who would say, you know what, I'm just going to put on three tires instead of four when I change your tires over from spring to winter. I live in Canada where we get winter. I'm assuming get winter in Boston, right? Same kind of thing. Change your summer tires over to winter tires. I'm just going to put on three instead. That's good enough, right? There's this good enough mentality that I don't think I'm hoping it doesn't last that long, because good enough in a lot of business examples, when you go to the doctor, you go to a surgeon who's going to perform, a surgery on you, you don't want your physician or your surgeon to say, well, that operation's good enough. I may have left a tool or two inside, but it's okay. It's all good. No, we really have to emphasize that in business, especially when you're paying for a service, that good enough isn't good enough. So why would you want good enough to only be going out there as far as your marketing and promotion for your business?
Yeah, I mean, only unless good enough is better than nothing at all.
I'm going to challenge you on that at some point. Maybe not now, maybe on this show, maybe at another forum. We're going to put the gloves on, but I will agree that getting something out there to at least take the first step. I'll agree with you there. Fine. I'll retract that.
We all have to start somewhere, Carl.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you for keeping me in line. I appreciate that. All right, let's talk about AI because it is such a hot button topic. It's one that I think a lot of people are afraid of. What's your take in general? And then we'll break it down into the podcasting space. But what's your feeling or what's your take in general on this, the whole AI? Can we call it a movement? Can we call it a movement or is it something else even?
I think when you live long enough, Carl, you start to see how history repeats itself. And it gets to a point where nothing's new under the sun, so to speak. So I would ask you, hey, Carl, do you remember the time when you were raised and your parents would tell you never to get in the car with strangers?
Yes, I do.
By all means, never get in the car with someone you don't know. Yet and still, we now have rideshare apps that people get into cars and trucks with people they never heard of before, never met, to take them to destinations that is public knowledge to that driver. It went through a stage where people freaked out. Early adopters got to it. And that at some point, it crossed the chasm where it became more mainstream. And people were like, oh, yeah, I Uber by way of Uber became a verb. Lyft became a verb, right? More so than taxi, right? It's just
Right.
like now people are accustomed to it. You know, and you can make that same argument for when the smartphone came out, when social media premiered, when the first automobile came out. Any new technology or innovation that's going to be widespread mainstream, a lot of people are going to be skeptical about it. A lot of people can be fearful of it because they don't truly understand it. And I think that's the same parallel we have here with artificial intelligence. It's something that's new. Everyone's talking about it. You only got a limited understanding of what it is. However, I would venture to say AI is here to stay. And more than anything else, you either are going to learn how to drive that car or get from point A to point B a lot slower on a horse and carriage, you know? And so I think that that's part of the thing is like we have to take on that same sort of mentality as before of curiosity, being proactive, taking the initiative to learn what you can, and then figure out how we can adopt it in what we're currently doing.
I think the other fear or the other piece of this is also the fact that currently there's not a lot of, shall we say, regulation around it. Just like when the internet came out, you know, when the World Wide Web, the information superhighway, it was being billed as back in the 90s. When it came into being, there were no rules. There was no regulation. And now, of course, there is a certain amount of regulation. There is a certain amount of control. And it's not Big Brother controlling it so that you can be controlled. It's putting safeguards in place to protect children, to protect vulnerable sectors, to protect what needs to be protected, basically. And I see that the same with AI, that yes, there's a lot of trepidation and there are a lot of things that people are saying about it. We're seeing examples where, by way of example, that you can, you know, put into AI, create a comedy monologue of Carol Burnett, for example. Well, we know, well, I do, I can tell from listening to it, because it's not quite perfect. It's getting good, but I can tell it's not Carol Burnett. And who's to say that Carol Burnett, who's still alive, God love her, at the recording of this episode, who's to say that she's going to allow that to happen, right? So there's still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of things that haven't come, you know, we haven't figured out how to not control it, but we haven't figured out what we're going to allow AI or how we're going to allow AI to coexist with us, not us with it, but it with us, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. You know, we're going to have a world where it's humans and pets, and soon it'll be humans, pets, and AI.
Almost like the Jetsons.
Basically, yeah, absolutely.
How do you see it playing a role in, for example, in the podcasting space? How do you see it making it something that podcasters will embrace?
Yeah, so you have to look at it like a spectrum, Carl, where it's just like you could have minimal involvement with AI with your podcast, and you could have it all the way on the opposite end of the spectrum where it's full involvement, right? So everything from like the minimum being like, okay, I record a audio podcast, and there in that podcast, I have a number of you know, like filler words, right? And I want this to be a little more professional. So you can use a tool that looks for those type of filler words or those gaps, right? and they'll just go ahead and just take those out. So it sounds like, oh, wow, like Philip actually knows what he's talking about. He's straight to the point. He tells you what it is, and that's that. Oh, I like that. I can listen to that. That's on one end. But now, as you move a little bit towards the right side of things, now you have things where it's making the whole process of making a podcast and producing one much easier than it was for me 10 years ago. It's to the point now that I've seen tools that you can put a podcast, that just a raw footage video into a tool. And in a matter of a minute or so, it'll come up with a transcript. Now, think about it. If you did an hour-long podcast, how long would it take you or somebody on your team to come up with a transcript of an hour-long conversation? Now, you're getting that done in like a minute. That same tool I've seen, you can come up with table of contents. So if you put it on YouTube, now you already know what timestamps you can use to segment that particular section. Like it already does that. Another part of it would be, now I could actually grab certain snippets of the video podcast, for example, and come up with those clips for YouTube and Reels and Instagram and that sort. Take all that and go to the very far end of the spectrum now. Now we got into the point, Carl, where it's a question that I like to joke with people and ask, how do you know you're really talking to the real Philip right now?
I don't know if I'm talking to the real Philip right now. I'm hoping I'm talking to the real Philip right now, but I don't know. I could be talking to, for lack of a better word, a clone. I could be talking to AI.
You could be talking to AI Philip, and here's the far end of the spectrum. I've now seen tools where they can have Carl and Philip talking to one another, and Carl and Philip are not in the room. Their voices have been cloned, and it's been programmed that they can do a full-length 30-minute audio podcast, and Carl and Philip were never on the recording, the actual real ones. And you can even do that on video to a certain degree too. So now it could be the sense that somebody can do a full podcast episode without even physically being involved. So I think what's going on there is the sense that if you, like you said before, Carl, if you are thinking about doing a podcast, AI has made it so that a lot of the barrier to entry has gone away if you're willing to invest in yourself here. And at the same time, makes it a lot easier that, yeah, I would say now is the best time to do a podcast because it's so much easier, depending on how involved you want AI to be.
I think there's a fear associated with AI because of the prospect of job elimination. If I start using AI, I'm going to eventually AI myself out of a job, even in the podcasting space. I mean, we run a full service production agency. We use existing AI tools. We use transcription services. We use other tools as well. I'm going to gaze into my crystal ball and say that as good as AI will get, I still think it'll still need a human to check it. It'll still need a human to make sure that, yes, that's the version of me I want to put out there. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right. Because here's the thing. What I talked to business owners before is we've now gotten to the point, Carl, where a small business doesn't have to have a marketing team of 9 anymore because of AI. When you talk about job elimination, that sort of like creative destruction, we are in a great era of that coming up for sure. Because if I can do just as much productivity with 2 people as opposed to 9, if I'm a business owner, I'm going to do it. That makes sense. Because here's the thing about AI. AI doesn't take days off. AI doesn't get sick. AI doesn't say, hey, I'm going on leave for a month, 4 months. AI doesn't wake up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I really don't feel like going to work right now. Is there any way I could do something different? Or halfway my way through work at 50% effort. So what essentially happens, Carl, is you have these tools that are at your beck and call at any point in time on demand that can do a lot of what your team was doing in a 9-person team, but do it just as good, if not better, with less time committed. Where now it becomes 2-person team, primarily for your point. Yeah, it won't take everyone's job. The person that knows how to manage the AI, that knows how to follow up on it, check and make sure like, hey, it's about 80% there. Okay, let me just, add a sentence here, take a word out, put some more of the personality in there, put the trademark and the branding statement on there. Okay, good to go. Took you probably like 10 minutes to do. Yeah, that person's going to be needed. What I call like the chief marketing human, right? The chief operating human the chief podcast human, right? But essentially what goes on there, Carl, is, it's going to take a lot of the productivity to a whole nother level where you don't need as many people. And all you need is just that one or two people that can manage it and that can come up with those higher level thinking and tasks that involve critical thinking, emotional intelligence, if you want to call it that, as far as interacting with people. But you just don't need as many people to do the same job, if not better now.
So I guess my question then is, how can people who are, and this is maybe above and beyond the podcasting space, or maybe in other sectors, but how can, let's say, normal people, how can they use AI to, let's say, future-proof their jobs or their careers? What are some steps that they can take to do that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, Carl, is we have to get our mindset right.
I like that.
If we don't have the right approach to it, it's not going to work for us. Right? If you don't know how to use a car when you get behind the wheel, you'll crash it every time. Right?
That's true.
So think about AI as like that nice 69 Corvette out in the driveway, pristine. Hey, you want to make sure you know how to drive that thing and keep it in good condition before you drive off the driveway. And I think it's something similar here with AI, that like this is like a Ferrari in your garage, but make sure you know how to use it. So the first thing is understand that AI is actually an opportunity to serve you, to help you become more productive in your job, help you to be more efficient, more effective in your job and career. However, the challenge is, are you going to actually learn it? How are you going to approach it? Because, I remember a quote that the CEO of NVIDIA once said, and he said that it's not AI that's going to take your job, Philip. It's the person that knows AI who's going to take your job. So we don't have to worry about a takeover of the robots. It's more so a takeover of the people that take the time to learn how to use AI, and then they start using AI. So the question then becomes, are you going to be one of those people, or are you going to be one of those ones that say, hey, I wish I had known AI while you're on unemployment?
I think that's the evolution, because if you've ever watched the movie Hidden Figures, and you're nodding your head yes, even though this is an audio-only podcast, and I think you know exactly where this is going. The whole term computer, well, computers were not these physical things back then. Computers were individuals who could crank out the formulas and the, whatever numbers needed to be used, in this case at NASA, in order to come up with the formulas to launch the rocket into space. Great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. Well, a computer now is this box that basically fits in our pocket now. It doesn't even sit on our desk much anymore like it used to. But that's the evolution. So computers aren't these people anymore. They are devices.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that computers still aren't created or managed or repaired or whatever by people.
Yep.
Because they are. They have to be, right? They have to be maintained by individuals. Every now and again, your computer's on the fritz. Where do you take it? You take it to somebody that knows how to fix it, right? So it's the people who know how to work with or program or fix, repair, manage that become very active parts. Same as transcription. Transcription for a podcast, can you imagine going back 20 years or 30 years when a transcriber literally would listen word for word to a recording, stop the recording, write stuff down, stop the recording, write stuff down, and did that ominous task, which now, as you said, takes seconds to do. What it spits out isn't 100%. It might be 92% or even 95%, but it still needs a human to scan over it and make sure that, for example, Philip's name is spelled correctly or his title is spelled correctly. So it's still a very important place for us to be. It's just evolved.
It's the world we live in now.
An evolution, so to speak. So it's about learning how to live harmoniously, then, I guess, is maybe a good way to put it. Live harmoniously with it, because to your point earlier, AI isn't going anywhere. It's not going away. It's only going to get bigger than it is today.
Right. It's almost silly to ask that question now, because it's like, you do realize that artificial intelligence, how it is today, it essentially is getting better by the day. It takes us 1 year to be from 39 years old to 40. Like, I can't rush that. It takes 1 year. But yet we have AI tools that can go from version 2.0 to version 4.0 in a matter of months, if not weeks. And so essentially what the question is why would you not try to learn this? Because this is a technology that's getting better quicker than we can as humans. And so it's almost like a non-negotiable now, right? Because essentially what's going on is that by the time you learn about certain tools, this time next month, there may be a whole nother iteration of them. That if you're not at least trying to stay abreast about what's going on, you can very quickly get overwhelmed if you ignored this for 6 to 12 months, And so I think the big part of it is, one, making a commitment to learn what this is, take it step by step, piece by piece, and really focus on first and foremost, what are the job duties in your job description, per se, that for sure you have to do. No one else can do it. No one can do it as good as you. That's your sphere of genius. Now, I would imagine 100% of your job duties and tasks aren't all in your sphere of genius. There's probably some things in there that you recognize. I wouldn't mind if an intern could do this. There's probably somebody that if they did it 80% as well, I'd be fine with it. And it would free me up to do more of what I know I do best, right? Those type of tasks are the ones I would say, which are those tasks or something that you'd be open to delegating, not to another person, but to delegate to AI. And at that point, it's taking the time to figure out what those tasks are and to see what's available that can do the type of job that you usually do on these tasks. And then just experiment. See which ones work, which ones don't. It's a trial and error process. Just understand it is what it is. It's like dating, right? You might have to kiss a number of frogs before you find your prince or princess. I get it. Just commit to it. It is what it is. But nevertheless, if you do that, you're going to be in a much better place because you're at least putting yourself out there. You're learning. You're figuring out what things work for you. You're growing in the process. You're keeping up to date with things. Now you can start to be seen as somebody that is more of a thought leader locally because you're taking the time to learn this stuff. So people are saying, hey, Carl, what's that tool that you use to do X, Y, Z? Can you show me how to do that? Oh, hey, Carl, can you actually train the whole team on how we do this? And while you're training them, after the training, you're not only just staying and resting on your laurels, because I believe that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. You're trying to stay a step ahead. And if you want to future-proof your job and career, you want to be able to try to stay one step ahead of your organization so that you're always a resource for them. You're always going to be someone of value to them. And you're always increasing your skill set and your knowledge base that even, God forbid, if something happens and they have to make a tough decision and let you go, they're going to be kicking themselves because they know you have a skill set that is highly valuable, highly transferable, that their competition would be dying to get a hold of if you had the opportunity to be with them.
Whew. Wow. Philip, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it there because I think that there's so many ways we can take this, but I'm going to leave it there. Before I turn you loose, though, the best way for people to get a hold of you and find out more about what you do, where can people go?
Yeah, so I've actually authored and published a couple books on artificial intelligence, one that's focused on employees and other focused on entrepreneurs and business owners. Both of those are available on Amazon to check out. If you like, just go on Amazon and look up my name, Philip Blackett, Philip Blackett. You can also go to my website, philipblackett.com, or connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Just look up my name, Philip Blackett. Happy to have a conversation with you.
And we'll make sure we put all of Philip's links in the chat. Philip, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I like that you've actually put my mind at ease a little bit. Not that I was too trepidatious about AI, because it's something that we use all the time, but it is evolving so quickly that sometimes it's hard to keep up. And when that evolution happens so quickly, sometimes it's very easy to get bogged down by, oh my goodness, it's taking my job. Ah! So thank you for putting my mind at ease and sharing with everyone that's listening. If this has been of interest to you, definitely check out the resources that Philip mentioned. Before I turn you loose, Philip, to put everyone else's mind at ease on the next show about AI, I'll give you the final thought.
Yeah, I think the big thing, Carl, I would share with everyone listening is this. We covered a lot of great topics here, and some topics that, are absolutely mind-blowing, and some that you say, okay, I can work with this. So what I would venture to say is, what's one takeaway or one lesson learned that you can take from this episode and apply it today. Don't let this be an episode that you listen to and you put it on the shelf and you move on and forget about what we just talked about. This stuff is here to help you, but I can't force you to apply it in your lives, right? So my call to action for you is come up with at least one thing that we talked about and say, you know what, today is the day I'm going to apply this, whether it's to learn more about artificial intelligence or to consider creating a podcast or getting a book to learn more. I'm going to do something that's going to move my life forward in a better direction than how it started as a result of listening to Carl's show today.
Who has been joined by Philip Blackett. And I think that's a great place to leave it. Philip, thank you so much for being my guest today.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. Happy to have this conversation and would love to do it again. Thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to our producer and production lead, Dom Carrillo, our music guru, Nathan Simon, and the person who works the arms, all of our arms actually, my trusty assistant, Stephanie Gafour. If you like what you heard today, leave us a comment and a review, and be sure to share it with your friends. If you don't like what you heard, please share it with your enemies. Oh, and if you have a suggestion of someone who you think would make an amazing guest on the show, let us know about it. Drop us an email. Ask Carl at carlspeaks.ca. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You'll find all those links in the show notes. And if you're ready to take the plunge and join the over 3 million people who have said yes to podcasting, let's have a conversation. We'll show you the simplest way to get into the podcasting space because, after all, we're Podcast Solutions Made Simple. We'll catch you next time.